You were taught that love is salvation, that the presence of someone in your life is proof of your worth, that loneliness is something to be avoided, even a sign of failure, and every time you are alone, a part of you starts to worry that there is something wrong with you, that if no one calls, no one holds, no one stays, then you must have done something wrong. But what if it was all wrong from the start? What if I told you that is in silence, where there is no recognition, no applause, no eyes watching, that you have the opportunity to touch the most sacred thing inside you, not the light from someone else, but the light that never had a chance to shine within yourself. I am not talking about isolation here. I am not advocating withdrawal from life. I'm talking about a different kind of solitude, the removal from the noise long enough to hear yourself breathe. The choice to be alone is not a punishment, but a promise. The promise that you will no longer have to compromise yourself to be loved, that you will no longer wear masks just to be accepted, and that you will no longer run from pain, because you are ready to step into it, hold it, and move through it. I know this sounds unappealing, because from a young age, we are conditioned to think that being alone is a sign of deficiency. A quiet child is seen as a problem. An adult who lives alone is looked upon with pity. And silence, it is hurriedly filled with voices, music, phone notifications, all so that no one has to be alone with themselves long enough. But have you ever wondered, why is this fear so strong? Is it because you've never really been there long enough to discover what's underneath? Carl Jung once said, "A person is only complete when he dares to go within." But we've been programmed the other way around. We've grown up in a society that teaches us to look outward to find ourselves, teaches us to construct a social identity, beautiful, fitting, comfortable, and confuses it with ourselves, teaches us that connection is necessary, but forgets to say, if you can't connect with yourself, all other connections can easily become dependency. And so you keep going, living, searching, someone to make you feel enough, someone to make you feel seen. But in all that searching, you gradually lose the ability to stay with yourself. Every time you're abandoned, you don't just lose someone else, you lose a part of yourself. And in that fear, you start to settle into unhealthy relationships, into pretending to be okay, into silencing your emotions, just to avoid being left behind. I'm not saying you don't need anyone. I'm just saying, before you need anyone, you need yourself. Before you love anyone, learn to sit with your loneliness without running away from it. And in this video, I'm going to take you on a journey that very few people dare to take, a journey back inside, where you'll understand why being alone isn't a failure, but a beginning, where you'll stop craving connection like a starving person and start radiating presence like a person who is already full. This is a journey with no background music, no audience, but maybe for the first time in your life, you'll truly meet yourself. And when that happens, you'll stop looking for validation, you'll become it. From a very young age, you are taught how to please others, not by direct words, but by subtle reactions. When you smile, you are praised for being good. When you are quiet or emotional, you are told that you are difficult to teach, stubborn, unsociable. You learn quickly to be loved. You must be agreeable, and to be accepted, you must conform to adult expectations. So you begin to construct a version of yourself that is lovable, a mask. Jung called it a persona. It is not fake, but it is not the whole you. It is a choice to survive in a world that judges people by what they appear to be, not what they feel. You learn to smile when you feel like crying. You learn to say it's okay when you are truly hurting. You become good at adapting, good at keeping the peace, good at being the person everyone thinks is okay. But there is one thing you are no longer good at: listening to yourself. You see, society doesn't really know how to deal with loneliness. A child playing alone is considered eccentric. An adult eating dinner alone, watching a movie alone, traveling alone, is often looked at with pity, even suspicion. Loneliness has become a kind of conclusion. There must be something wrong with them. And so we live in a culture that avoids loneliness at all costs. There has to be a sound, a device in hand, a conversation going on, someone nearby. It doesn't matter who, as long as you're not alone. And that's why, when you finally find yourself truly alone, no voice, no notification, no eyes watching, a part of you starts to panic. It feels empty. It feels like you don't exist. But the truth is, you're not empty. You just haven't been there long enough to realize who you are when you're no longer playing someone else. That feeling of panic, not because the present is lonely, it's because the past has never been healed. The memories you've forgotten, the times you were rejected, abandoned, judged, misunderstood, they're all still there. They don't go away. They're just waiting for you to quiet down so they can come back and ask you one thing. Can I be seen now? Do you notice when you're alone and start to feel anxious? What's talking inside you? It's not the soul, it's the ego. The ego can't stand silence. It needs feedback. It needs someone to confirm its existence. It needs someone's eyes to know it's there. The soul isn't afraid. The soul doesn't need recognition. The soul just needs you to come home. And that's the biggest paradox. What's really panicking in loneliness isn't you. It's the character you've identified with for so long. When you sit in silence and feel insecure, it's because your persona is starting to lose its place. And that's not the end. That's an opportunity. But if no one ever tells you that this feeling is normal, that it's not a sign of aberration but a door to truth, you run, you turn on some music, you text, you find an ex, you buy something, you surf the internet until you lose track of time, not because you're weak, but because you haven't been taught that insecurity is where the journey to yourself begins. And then you start to mistake connection for dependence. You think that love is having someone else make you feel complete, that having someone by your side will make your emptiness disappear. But no one can heal a wound they didn't cause. They can walk with you, but they cannot walk for you. Carl Jung said that no one becomes whole without going inside themselves. And going inside means accepting the truth. You have lived for a long time in a version of yourself that was designed not to be left behind. But because of that, it is not the real you. You cannot step into freedom if you are still clinging to a mask. And you cannot truly love if that love is a means of escaping the fear of being left behind. This is when you start asking yourself, the loneliness you feel, is it because you really want to be alone, or are you just too used to not being chosen? Are you living in peace, or is it just numbness? If you are brave enough to answer these questions, you are already further along than many people, and that is the first step to stop living as a mask and start living as yourself. There is a moment in your solo journey when everything suddenly becomes very quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the quiet that makes all the inner noises ring out clearly. There is no one to talk to, no role to play, nothing to cling to as an excuse. That is when you can no longer hide, and the truth begins to emerge as it really is. When there is no one to hold you back, you begin to face yourself. Not the version you used to survive, not the selves you built to be loved, but the real you, incomplete, not ideal, often very chaotic. And at that moment, the first thing you feel is not relief. It is chaos. You thought you would find peace in the silence, but what you encounter first is forgotten pain, memories that have never been named, emotions that have been suppressed for years because you should not feel this way. They come up, raw and uninvited. Nothing prepares you for that moment, because this is not a rational exercise. This is the work that only emotional courage can do. Carl Jung called this process shadow work. The shadow is not the evil or scary thing you thought it was. It is the part of you that you don't want to see. The part you hide away to be loved, to not be rejected. The times you were jealous but pretended to be noble. The times you were in pain but tried to act okay. The times you wanted to be held and acknowledged, but smiled and said, "I'm used to it." When you start to stay still long enough, the shadow starts to knock on your door, not to hurt you, but to make you see all the parts of you that you've ignored because you thought they made you weak. They don't make you weak. It's the denial that makes you tired. You think you're strong because you've been through so much, but maybe you're just silent because you've never given yourself the chance to feel. The silent transformation isn't about adding, it's about taking away. Taking away the defenses, the reflexive habits, the unconscious roles you've worn for so long. You can't step into the truth if you're still playing a role, and the role only falls away when there's no one there to see. That moment can be lonely, not because you're abandoned, but because you're finally nowhere to hide. There's no one to blame, no circumstances to excuse. There's just you, and the reality you've been avoiding. Fear begins to speak. If I really am like this, who will love me? But in that question, a door opens. Because you begin to realize, loving yourself is not about waiting for others to accept you. It is about you stopping, rejecting yourself. Every shadow exists for a reason, not to hinder you, but to complete you. And the only thing the shadow is waiting for is for you to be present enough to stay, not run away from it like you used to. In that space, every emotion begins to be named. Maybe an anger without a reason, an inexplicable sadness, an emptiness that makes you doubt everything. You think you are breaking apart, but in fact, you are just shedding the shackles that have been held for so long without ever being fully felt. And as Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining light, but by making darkness conscious. The most important thing in this phase is don't rush through it. Don't try to get it over with. Get it over with. Don't make the darkness a step to be done with. It's not an enemy, it's a guide. It's a gateway to the truest version of you. And every pain, if looked at directly, can be turned into strength. But there's no need to be strong. There's no need to prove that you're tough enough to get through every emotion. Just don't give up on yourself when things get dark. The transformation doesn't have to be quick. It just has to be real. Every tear you let flow is a part of the past that's released. Every breath you slow down in the pain is a choice you make instead of running away. And in those small choices, you're rewriting how you treat yourself, with patience, with kindness, with honesty. There are no shortcuts to the darkness, but you don't have to go all the way. You just have to be brave enough to stay with yourself for a minute longer, and then another minute, until the fear is no longer a storm that swallows you, but just a wind that blows through, and you are still there, whole, deeper, more real. The journey into the dark is not for the fast, it is for the real, and you are in the middle of it. Not to become someone new, but to become yourself again, without fear, without denial. This is not the end. This is the beginning, where the old falls away, and the real begins to be born, in the silence, in the dark, in you. After passing through the first layer of darkness, another silence begins to appear, but this time, it is not as loud as before. It does not ask you to do anything. It does not pull you down like a wave. It is just present, softly, steady. And in that silence, something begins to move slowly, not in your mind, but deeper, in your body. You begin to notice how you breathe. You realize that your chest is always tense, your shoulders are always slightly hunched, and your stomach is rarely loose. No one taught you that. You just unconsciously learned to shrink into yourself, to support yourself. You learned to hold your breath when you were afraid of being abandoned, to tighten your body when you did not dare to express your true feelings. And so, little by little, your body becomes a place to store unspoken memories, undigested emotions, pain that was never cried out. Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious lives not only in the mind, it lives in the body." And indeed, every repressed emotion leaves a physical mark. It is no coincidence that when you are stressed, your stomach contracts. When you are rejected, your heart aches. When you are afraid, your skin turns pale. The body does not speak in words, but it remembers everything. What the mind wants to forget, the body still retains. And then when you begin to be quiet, that is really quiet, not temporarily running away, the body begins to respond, not with reasoning, but with feeling. A deeper breath, a more peaceful sleep, a cry about nothing in particular, a release you did not expect. That is a sign of release. You do not need to understand everything that is happening. Just do not resist. Do not try to return to normal. Because in fact, the normal state you have lived in is not natural. It is the state of a body learning to survive in an emotionally unsafe environment. Now, as you sit quietly in deliberate solitude, your nervous system begins to relearn. It no longer responds to every ring of the phone. It no longer tenses up in fight or flight mode. It begins to understand. You are safe. No one is judging. No one is leaving. No one is demanding anything of you. And it is in that safety that you can begin to feel. The feelings begin to come back. But this time, you don't swallow them down. You don't try to understand them, to explain them, to justify them. You just stay with them. As a friend, as a witness, not pushing them away, not reacting. And it is there that you begin to truly reconnect with yourself, not just in thought, but in lived experience. From that connection, a new feeling begins to emerge, very thin, very light, but real. It is intuition, not a vague hunch, not a guess, but a kind of knowing that doesn't need a reason. It doesn't come from your head. It comes from within, from where your body, your emotions, and your soul begin to operate at the same frequency. Intuition is not in a hurry. It doesn't intrude every time you are confused. It only appears when you are quiet enough, when your mind stops fighting, stops analyzing, when you stop looking for the right answer and simply listen. At that point, intuition is like a quiet stream, not rushing, but strong enough to make you realize, this is my direction. Carl Jung considered intuition to be one of the 4 fundamental functions of the human psyche, not something mystical, but a deep intelligence, where the conscious and the unconscious meet. It doesn't need logic to prove it, and you don't need other people to agree to believe it. When intuition comes alive, you begin to feel what is right, not because someone told you so, but because your body, your emotions, your whole being are pointing in that direction. You don't need a reason to say no to something that no longer fits. You don't need anyone to confirm that you are doing the right thing, because the feeling inside becomes a compass, a natural alignment. It's a between you and you. And then everything begins to move differently. No more rushing, no more fear of missing out. Every decision becomes clearer. Every relationship becomes more honest. Not because you are trying to be right, but because you are being real. Reconnecting with your body, your emotions, your intuition is not a destination. It is a process of coming back to live. No longer reacting, but being present. No longer defending, but letting go. No longer running from fear, but walking into it and listening to it until it dissolves. It's not a fast road, but it's a real road. And every step along the way, you say to yourself, here I am, I'm ready to live. Not according to expectations, according to truth. When you begin to live in a state of true presence, not rushing out of feeling, not resisting silence, not avoiding the unloved parts of yourself, something profound begins to happen. Your energy changes. It is not a change that is visible from the outside. Others may look at you and not see anything new, but you feel it. It is the difference between someone who is trying to be and someone who is. You begin to stop reacting, stop needing to please, stop straining to be recognized, and from there, you begin to radiate a very different kind of frequency. Not a wave of begging, not a wave of defense, but a wave of presence. Presence that does not need to be proven. It does not depend on what you say, what you do, what you have. It is the quiet certainty of someone who has touched themselves and is no longer frightened by the void. There begins to be something inside you that is as solid as earth, as still as water. It makes no noise, but everything around you feels it. Before, you would walk into a room and try to get noticed. Now, you walk in, and silence follows you. Not the silence of being alone, but the silence of someone who no longer needs the crowd to validate his or her worth. It is a transformation of inner energy. Carl Jung called it contact with the harmonic center of the soul, the self. When you live closer to that center, you no longer live from fear or from memory. You live from a stable, independent place. And from there, the outside world begins to move along. Relationships that used to drain you slowly leave your life, not because you push them away, but because you no longer send out signals of approval. Old situations, where you once felt the need to prove or endure, suddenly become unfamiliar. Not because you have grown cold, but because you are no longer willing to compromise your truth for the familiar. You begin to choose less, but what you choose are the things that truly resonate with you. You no longer live to be understood. You live to not betray yourself, and that presence, as it becomes more and more apparent, thus it becomes a magnetic field, not to attract, but to organize, to keep what needs to stay, to let go of what once existed because of your lack. Before, you acted from need, from lack, from fear of abandonment. But now every action you take comes from a very different place, a place of sufficiency. And when you act from that place, you no longer need to control the outcome, because you are not doing to fill a void. You are simply living, being present, touching something real in each moment. You also begin to notice very small details. The rhythm of your breathing when you pass an old place, the feeling in your chest when faced with a choice, the silence in your heart when someone leaves. and you no longer judge those feelings. You just listen, as if your body and soul are having a dialogue. No one needs to stand in the middle. No need to interpret. It is the state of a person who is living with himself. Nothing more is needed. Nothing is missing. And there, loneliness is no longer something to avoid. It becomes a part of you. A gentle and profound part. Part of it is to keep the necessary distance from the world, not to avoid it, but to stop being lost in it. You don't separate from life. You just stop being swept away. You stand still at your center. And from there, every connection, every action, every feeling starts from a real place. No acting, no pretense, no need for much. It's presence, not the presence of an ego that needs attention, but the presence of a soul that has stopped being afraid of being forgotten. You begin to see a change not only in how others treat you, but in how you treat yourself. Lighter, more honest, and most importantly, you no longer leave yourself to pursue anything. From solitude, you enter presence, no longer a place to endure, but a place to begin. When you have lived in presence long enough, love begins to take on a different color. It is no longer something you grasp at to escape loneliness, nor an ideal image you cling to feel worthy. Love in that state is not a door that leads you out of yourself. It is a place you enter when you are truly present. Here is a simple but hard truth. Love does not heal the wounds you refuse to look at. It may expose them, stir them up, make them more visible than ever. But if you still see love as a cure, a salvation, a reward for being good enough, then you have not left the old cycle, loving to avoid being alone. Carl Jung once said, "No healthy relationship can be born of dependency," and that is the essence of mature love. It does not begin with lack. It begins with enough, not because you don't need anyone, but because you don't need anyone to be yourself. When love is no longer a refuge, you stop being afraid of losing it. You stop controlling, stop bending, stop shrinking your dreams and your voice just to keep someone. Because now you don't love to be kept, you love to be shared. And true sharing doesn't require someone to shrink back to make you feel safe. You begin to realize that you've been living in versions of love that were distorted by fear. You've been accepting things that weren't love, just because they were familiar. You've been staying in connections that drained you, just because they felt like someone. And now, in the silence that has become a habit, you see clearly. It wasn't that you loved the wrong person, it was that you loved the wrong way. Love isn't about falling in love, it isn't about losing your boundaries, it isn't about merging so much that you forget who you are. It is an encounter between two people who have gone through their own darkness and are still learning to be true. Love is no longer hiding, no longer performing, it is seeing each other clearly and still choosing to stay. When you have gone through a journey inward, you stop craving overwhelming love. You no longer seek high feelings, nor are you blinded by promises. You begin to recognize real love, often very quiet, very light, very deep, not rushed, not sparkling, but steady as breath, solid as the ground, gentle as the first light of day. And if such a love has not come, you are no longer impatient, because you are no longer living in the waiting. You are not counting the days to be loved. You are living each day as if you were loved by yourself. And that is the first love you ever lacked, but now can give to yourself. You do not need love to validate your worth, but you do not reject it either. When love comes, if it comes, you don't close your heart for fear of being hurt. But you don't open all the doors just to be filled. You welcome it as a new friend, not a savior but a companion. Mature love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your truth. It doesn't ask you to shrink so someone else can fit you. It allows you to be you, whole, authentic, and maybe not easy to understand, but it's an acceptance you once dreamed of having from someone else. And now, you're big enough to give yourself. And if that person comes, you'll know, not by the vows and promises, but by the peace you feel when you stand side by side, not having to do anything to be loved, simply being there, as you are, and seeing the other person is the same. Love, when it's no longer an end, becomes a reflection, a gentle mirror, where you don't need to put on makeup to be reflected beautifully. And that's why you'll only choose to stay with someone who makes you see who you really are, not someone who makes you forget that part. You used to think that loneliness was the worst thing, but it turns out, it's because of being alone that you learn to love without fear. You don't need love to live, but when you know how to live authentically, love, if it comes, will no longer be a fulcrum. It will be a resonance. And then you no longer lose yourself to love. You become yourself, even when you love. And that's the kind of love that doesn't need to be held back, because it doesn't come from lack. It comes from freedom.